Hello and welcome to the Love Energetics podcast. I'm your host, Maria Manifest, and this is the space where we talk about all things mindset, manifestation, self-love, and high-frequency dating strategies. My mission is to help as many women as possible elevate their self-image, master self-love, and live the extraordinary love life that they deserve. And with that, let's get into today's topic. Okay, this is a good one. We're going to be talking about all things toxic dating patterns. So we're going to go into what types of toxic dating patterns there are, how they form, and of course, how to break the cycle, how to overcome them, and what life will look like after you overcome these nuisances that we're going to be done with forever. Okay? So let's get started. If you're not familiar, if you haven't watched any of the previous episodes, if you want to hear more about my story and my signature method, it's called the Love Energetics Method, which is why that's the title of this podcast, right? So if you want to learn more about how I created the Love Energetics Method and, my whole story of how I completely transformed my dating life, I overcome a lot of deep-rooted toxic dating patterns over the years. I talk all about that in my first episode where I talk about my story and what Love Energetics is. So if you're curious, you want to hear more like of a deeper dive into that first podcast is definitely for you. And then if you haven't listened to the other ones, I totally recommend that you listen to those as well, because I'm trying to make this all very cohesive in all the different pieces that have helped me, have helped my clients just live the most fulfilled life, but, really just healing all of the issues that a lot of us go through as women in the collective, experience of dating and on a mission to find our life partner, our soulmate, the person that really values us and sees us, right? So, highly recommend you listen to some of the other episodes too if you haven't listened to those. And if you haven't already, I would really, really appreciate it if you subscribe, follow the podcast, and share this with a friend that you would also think could get a lot of value out of this, because word of mouth is so powerful. And the more people that know about this type of work, the more people can start living more fulfilling love lives and just becoming the best version of themselves. And so one thing I did just want to kind of talk about with the Love Energetics Method, right, is I talk about it in 4 different phases, 4 different sections of processes. It's like a step-by-step formula of how I overcame years of toxic dating patterns, just unfulfilling dating experiences, a low self-image, low confidence, all of that stuff, how I completely transformed it. I did a complete 180 in my dating life. I started attracting much more high-value men, much more fulfilling dating experiences, and ultimately I attracted my soulmate, who is now my fiance, who I'm getting married to in 3 months or 4 months, something like that. It's coming up very quick every single day. But this is my entire process that I personally went through, and now I take my clients through, which I bucket into 4 different sections. So the first one would be the healing era. The second one would be self-love energetics. The third phase would be magnetic dating mastery. And then we wrap up with our last, but not least, definitely the favorite, right? The soulmate manifestation, because you definitely need all of those pieces as the foundations before you get to the tip of the pyramid, so you would say. So with that, I really wanted to, this is my 4th episode of the podcast, and I really wanted to talk about toxic dating patterns, because I think it is something that shows that there is healing and self-love work to be done. And so in order to really experience a more fulfilling dating life, then you need to overcome these toxic dating patterns, which can be done in the phase 1 and 2, so the healing era and the self-love energetics, and then that will really set you up for success with magnetic dating mastery, because you don't want to just keep doing the same thing over and over again, right? That's, what they say is like the definition of insanity, right? Is doing the same thing over and over again. And if you keep on experiencing the same patterns over and over again in your love life, and you're not getting the desired results that you want, there is something that you need to go back and look in, pop the trunk or whatever, pop the hood on your car and look inside to the engine of what's going on, right? Like look inside within you, your mindset, see what is going wrong and see what needs to be tweaked, changed, shifted, cleared, so that you can Stop getting the undesirable results and start getting the results that you want and deserve. And at the root of all of these podcast episodes too, like I talk about being lucky in love and embodying your lucky in love identity. We all have the lucky in love identity within us, and this is a component that will help elevate you into your lucky in love identity. You know, the girl that is magnetic, has high self-confidence, high self-worth, and she is treated as such, right? You know, when you look at, everybody has like somebody that they've seen before, right? And they're just like, oh, she's just lucky. Everything works out for her. Like she just really lucked out in her love life and things just come naturally for her. We can all think of somebody that fits that description, but that can be you too, all right? It's not just luck. It's truly energy, subconscious reprogramming, realigning your belief systems, and raising your self-image. You know, with all of this different mindset and manifestation work that I talk about on here, you can become lucky in love too. And that is what I'm trying to get that information out to as many women as possible, because everybody deserves to feel that way and everybody deserves to be fulfilled in their love life. That is not something that is just for the lucky few. Everybody deserves that and everybody can have that. And so with that, let's get into toxic dating patterns. Okay, so what are toxic dating patterns? We got to start with the foundation. What are these things? Okay. And so I would say the most common toxic dating patterns is choosing unavailable partners. Well, I guess actually I was going to say choosing emotionally unavailable partners. But sometimes people also go after people that are taken as well. So that could be you. You might be interested in going after somebody that is unavailable, whether that's emotionally or like literally unavailable. Rushing intimacy or ignoring red flags, dating the player, the cool guy, which there's nothing wrong with dating somebody that's cool, but like the perceived cool guy, we'll talk about it more later in the episode. Going into self-abandonment, like giving up your life, your values, things like that. Overgiving and codependency, attracting narcissists, attracting situations where there's infidelity, whether it's on your end or the other person's end, abusive relationships physically or emotionally, verbally, all of those different types of things I would classify as toxic dating patterns. I'll be completely honest and I'll be completely vulnerable here. I can definitely say that I've fallen into almost all of these buckets, if not literally all of them. But I have overcome every single one. So I hope that gives you some type of at peace situation, because if you're like, oh my God, like I have all of these issues and I don't know how I'm ever going to change, how I'm ever going to be different, this is all I've ever known. You don't have to think like that, because I went the majority of my life going through all of these toxic dating patterns, and I completely changed my life 5 years ago, and I've never gone back to any of this stuff since. What I will say about my love energetics method and all of this work is that it is permanent. If you do it the right way, you will permanently shift and become this new version of yourself where all of this stuff is just so much more natural and becomes more of who you really are. Because at the end of the day, these toxic dating patterns that you are experiencing and the reasons that you do them, it's not actually who you are. It's just either programming that you learned growing up or behavior that you modeled from, parents or other caretakers growing up, or things that you like abandonment wounds or just trauma responses from being hurt or seeing something traumatic that taught you that you had to live a certain way, or what you really wanted wasn't possible for you, so you had to go about living like this way. Like a lot of this stuff, if it's not what you want, it does not fulfill you, it doesn't light you up, it's not who you are. So don't ever feel like you need to identify yourself with this, because that's not who you are. It's just an area that needs to be healed and shifted and changed. And our brains are very plastic, and which means that, that's from a neuroscience perspective. Our brains are very plastic, much more than science actually ever thought. Previously, we thought that, the older that you get, the harder it is to change your brain. And like, once you hit like 30, forget it, you're never going to change. That's actually really not true. Our brains are plastic and we can change no matter how old we are, no matter how long we've done something. Change is truly possible. So I wanted to just kind of set the stage with that so that you have that motivation and that empowerment to know that you can take this information and really truly change your life. So with that, I've kind of just laid out a lot of the different toxic dating patterns, right? At the end of the day, it's just really comes down to you have these toxic dating patterns, if it was any of the ones I listed, or maybe it's another one, the reason for that, the root of why you have those toxic dating patterns is just energetic misalignment and unresolved wounds. And with that energetic misalignment and unresolved wounds, that is something that is internal within you, right? And this is something that I don't want you to shy away from. I don't want you to take offense to this because, trust me, this was hard to hear at first for me, but then it became very empowering to know. So just stay with me here, okay? Because I promise that this is working out for your benefit and this is working out in your favor. And if you don't switch to this perception, you are always going to feel out of control with what's happening in your life. And so what that is that life is truly a mirror and people are just reflecting your internal state back to you. So your outer relationships are a reflection of your inner energetic state. And so the reason that you are experiencing people cheating on you, narcissistic partners, emotional or physical abuse, attracting people that are emotionally unavailable, attracting people that don't want to commit to you, it's a reflection of your inner energetic state. It's not a reflection of you necessarily, because remember, I said this isn't who you are, it's just your wounds, right? It's just your trauma responses, your programming. It's not who you are, but what you currently have inside of you with all of that is causing people to treat you in this way and is causing you to attract people like that in your life. And, I think that as a society, we've been so conditioned to be in this type of victim state in the sense of, oh, this wasn't my fault, it's their fault, not taking the responsibility for what's happening in your life. And it's a lot easier in a sense to feel that way and go about life thinking that it's not you, it's them, and this isn't your fault and you can't do anything about it, because the ego loves that, because then you don't have to take responsibility, you don't have to do anything, you don't have to change, you don't have to feel like you're a bad person or the wrong. It is a lot easier in a sense to go about life in that way, but on the flip side of that leaves you so powerless to change your life. And personally, I felt that once I knew that all of this was a reflection of me, that felt very freeing, because it was like, oh, okay, so I can actually change this and I don't need to experience this anymore. I don't need to leave my dating life or really any area of my life up to chance. I have the power within me. I attracted this. I created this because I'm the creator of my reality, right? That manifestation element that we're tying in here. If I'm the creator of my reality, then I created this, but that also means that I don't have to continue to create this and I can create something new. So that is really the perception that I want you to take into this episode and really into any of these episodes that I talk about, because at the end of the day, life is a mirror. Life is reflecting your internal state. And the only way to have complete control of your life is to take ownership for what is happening and do the internal work to make the changes so that you can create more of what you desire in your life. And that should be freeing and that should be empowering. And if it's not, send me a DM or send me an email and let me help explain that to you further. I would love to go deeper into this so that you really truly understand it, because that mindset, that belief, and that perception will truly change your life for the best. And I will tell you right now, full disclosure, my previous relationship before I manifested my soulmate was a physically and emotionally abusive relationship. And I had to fully come to terms with the fact that I created this relationship. I had a part in this. I was not a victim of domestic violence. I was not a victim of domestic abuse. I created that. I attracted this type of person. I attracted this type of behavior towards me. And, I have compassion for myself, right? Because you only do the best with the information that you're given. I only knew what I knew at the time, right? But now that I have this newfound information, a big piece of my healing journey and kind of making peace with that situation and truly releasing all of the emotional and physically, like emotionally stored information, trauma that was in my body, in order to truly make peace and move forward in my life from that relationship, I had to take ownership of the parts that I created. That's a big piece of acceptance and healing. And if you're interested in hearing more about the healing era, I do have a previous episode about how your healing era isn't optional. It is literally necessary. And this is one of the many reasons why. I truly believe and know that if I always viewed myself as a victim to that abusive relationship, I would have never been able to move forward, and I would have carried that baggage into my next relationship. I am not just telling you something and not taking my own advice, right? I just wanted to share that because I want you to know that, like, I've been there, I've created things that I am not proud of, and I've taken full responsibility for that, and that's helped me for the better. So that's one thing, right, is with these toxic dating patterns, right, taking responsibility for your piece in the creation process that is needed in order to move forward. So that's one piece. And again, these toxic dating patterns, like, I'll go through a couple examples so you can have a better idea of like why they are the way that they are and give you some additional insight into why maybe you attract those types of people in your life. I would say that almost all of them have a foundational root cause issue of having a low self-image, having low self-worth, having low self-love, kind of putting all of that in a bucket. I would say that is one of the biggest pieces. And then the second biggest piece that is common, all of those toxic dating patterns, is worthiness wounds and not feeling safe, essentially. And I've talked about this a little bit too with the worthiness wound, like feeling like you're not worthy of healthy, fulfilling love, which kind of stems into having a low self-image, because typically if you have a low self-image, you have low self-worth. And if you have low self-worth, you don't believe that you are worthy of great things in life. And at the end of the day, if you don't believe you are worthy of something, you can't actually have it or at least sustain it long term, right? That's why sometimes you get into a relationship, but you can't keep that good relationship because you don't ultimately feel worthy of it. And so self-sabotage comes up. So yeah, I would say the low self-image, the worthiness wounds, and the lack of feeling safe through just growing up, right? Depending on your life experiences, depending on the trauma that you've had in, usually with either parents or love. Like as you're a kid, you're going through your first relationships. That's when a lot of these love life beliefs really form. It might not feel safe for you to be in love because you got hurt once before and your subconscious remembers that hurt, so they don't feel safe to fall in love again. And so these are, I would say, the most common themes that lead to toxic dating patterns. All right, so I'm going to put them up here so that we remember, and you can just take note on that, right? So it's the low self-image / self-worth / self-love. 2, worthiness wounds, and 3 is lack of safety. Okay. And so talking about these toxic dating patterns, right? I would say choosing emotionally unavailable partners, or even like people that you can't have that are unavailable, literally they're in a relationship. The reason you are going after somebody that you can't have is because you don't feel safe falling in love. You don't trust yourself to fall in love, so as a way to protect yourself, you kind of like entertain yourself and distract yourself with people that you can't really have. It's a very sneaky thing, right? So that's one thing. Another thing too is you don't feel worthy of real healthy love, of like requited love or reciprocated love, I should say. Like you don't feel worthy of someone loving you in return. So you go after people that you know aren't going to love you. Especially if you have a deep-rooted belief system in that, your subconscious always wants to prove itself right, and it wants to keep the same beliefs. So you're going to be in a cycle of constantly attracting people that aren't going to reciprocate love back to you to keep that belief system alive. And that's a big thing too with belief systems. And we'll kind of talk about that in a little bit. I would also say rushing intimacy and ignoring red flags and like self-abandonment. A lot of those are like overgiving. That comes from a worthiness wound too, of like you don't feel good enough in who you are, so you feel like you need to overcompensate in some way to be worthy. It's kind of like that anxious attachment style that I talked about in the healing era episode. You have that like scarcity lack mentality and that fear of loss, so you're constantly putting pressure and trying to control the situation as much as possible to prevent the what you believe is inevitable down the road loss. You're trying to do anything possible to prevent loss because you are afraid of loss. And so that is why you don't follow boundaries, right? You have boundaries and you don't enforce them because you're afraid of loss, right? That's why you rush intimacy, because you think that it's going to help push things along, which will ultimately prevent loss. Or you ignore red flags because you don't want to start over. You don't want to lose this person. So those are all kind of different themes that relate to why you keep repeating that toxic dating pattern, or like either one of those or multiple of those. I'd say those are very similar. So you probably have at least one, if not two or three of those. So that's just like a couple different examples of toxic dating patterns. Oh, I guess I didn't talk about, I would say like when you attract narcissist or you attract an abusive partner, whether that's a physically abusive partner or an emotionally abusive partner, that is because you are beating yourself up internally. And it doesn't mean that you're beating yourself up in your love life. It could mean that you're beating yourself up over your body, over your career, over your finances, over just really anything in life. If you beat yourself up, you will attract somebody that is beating you up, whether that is with words or physical action. And that was something I had to learn the hard way. So I hope that, through this podcast, I can help prevent some of that stuff for you guys, or stop it before it gets too severe, and not have you take as long as I did to go through all of these shifts to get the desired outcomes that you want and prevent more traumatic experiences from happening to you. Okay, so now that we've gotten a good sense of what toxic dating patterns are and gave some themes of why you're experiencing them, why they happen, I'm about to take this to an even deeper level to talk about, where do these toxic patterns begin? Like, let's go all the way back. Speaking of going all the way back, most of these toxic dating patterns actually stem from childhood. So these attachment styles, modeling from parents, just those early experiences of love, that is very, very common for why people have toxic dating patterns later in their adult life. And let me just explain a little bit more of the neuroscience and just the psychology of why your childhood is so pivotal to what happens in your adulthood if you do not do the intentional inner work, healing work, subconscious reprogramming work that I teach about later in life. Essentially, your subconscious mind. Okay, so with the brain, we have two major areas of the brain that we talk about a lot, right? It's the unconscious brain, also known as the subconscious brain or subconscious mind, and the conscious brain, conscious mind. And so the thing is your subconscious, aka your unconscious mind, actually creates 95% of your reality, and honestly does a lot of the legwork. Your subconscious mind is like, when you do things on habit, like you can't remember if you locked your apartment before you left. That is all your subconscious mind, breathing, your heart pumping blood, all of that stuff is your subconscious mind. Your conscious mind is more like you're learning something, right? You're in math class, learning how to do a math equation, or you're planning out your day, right? You're trying to think about, well, when do I have to leave at this time in order to get here? That's all your conscious mind. And I would say we spend the majority of our waking day in the conscious brain. And so it's very interesting because a lot of the subconscious mind is like kind of unknown to us in our waking hours, but that is what creates the majority of our life. So we are ruled by the programming of our subconscious brain, kind of like a computer in a sense. Your computer has a program that it runs on. You have a program that you run on, and the majority of it was formed from the ages 0 to 7 because that is when you are most like a sponge, absorbing everything about life. You ever wonder why a kid is always like, why this? Why that? They are trying to understand life and form beliefs and form understandings of why things are the way that they are. So when you are older than that, right? When you're going into ages 8, 9, 10, all the way through adulthood, what you learned in those first 0 to 7 years is kind of what you take as what life is. Again, unless you do this work that I teach, or, it doesn't mean that you have to learn necessarily from me, but unless you do this type of work, which is like the neuroscience, the healing work, the shadow work, the subconscious reprogramming, mindset stuff. If you don't do any of that, then you have the programming that your mind created from ages 0 to 7. Which is a very crazy thing to think about, right? It's kind of hard to believe, but yeah, like that's why that happens. And so that is why your parents, your caretaker, they play such a pivotal role in your attachment styles and in your perception of love and relationships, because they are the first people that you saw really in a relationship and how they interact. And so that's kind of how you determine what love really means. So, this is why a lot of people who have divorced parents have toxic relationship patterns, right? Because they observed that, and that creates a lot of fear for them, right? Fear for falling in love because it ends in divorce, right? It doesn't work out. That's a really common one. Or if their parents fought a lot, that can become very normalized for you growing up, that it's normal to fight and scream at each other or whatever in a relationship because that is what you witnessed growing up. That's what was normal to you. Or maybe even something a little bit less common, right? Even like parents that are still married to this day, but maybe they just like always kept things in and like never really addressed it with their parent. Or like, say like your parents always kept things in, and you would overhear maybe your mom talking on the phone with her friends, complaining, but never really addressing it. You most likely would think it's more normal. And even if you didn't even think it was normal, you are more likely to pick up on that behavior and model it later in adulthood in your own life, where you would feel scared to confront somebody, and you would just be more likely to talk about it with a friend than to really do anything and communicate with your partner. So you didn't really learn the healthy communication style growing up from your parents because it wasn't what was modeled to you. So that's kind of like, I would say, like the bulk of, the reasons why most of our toxic dating patterns begin in childhood. And so what I would challenge you to do as a takeaway from this episode is to get really clear and think through, like, what is your parents' relationship? You could even go into thinking about your grandparents as well, any other caretakers, if you didn't grow up with your parents, whoever was a caretaker for you, whoever you feel like really taught you a lot about love. Think about what you witnessed and what you brought through life. Like, think about what you witnessed and what you ended up kind of modeling. So just try to look back. I would say, like, start by looking back first and seeing what was modeled to you, and then start to piece together kind of how you do things in your adult life, in your own relationships, and how that seems linked. So start to kind of piece the timeline together of how all of that stuff formed. And if you're having a little bit of trouble kind of remembering some stuff from childhood, you can even see how your parents interact to this day, and that'll probably give you a good idea of what you witnessed as a child. And then I would say that if you're still struggling with that, look at your beliefs and your behaviors now and see if you can find a memory where you saw that as a kid. So if you now tend to argue with your partner and you scream at them and yell at them, try to pinpoint a memory and see if you saw your parents do that or whoever was your caretaker growing up. So just try to do some deep dive into your subconscious mind, into your past, because we can't heal anything. We can't change anything. We can't overcome these toxic dating patterns until we make them aware. You have to bring them from your subconscious brain to your conscious through this type of process, through this type of work. Because once you're aware, then you can actually shift it and change it. So that is key. That is my takeaway for you on the childhood aspect. I would say the other place that toxic dating patterns begin is past heartbreaks and relationship trauma that gets stored in the body. I think that this is the most powerful when we're kids. Like, think back to your first heartbreak at like 13 or 14 years old, or, you know, as far back as you can really go, like your first major heartbreak, maybe the second or the third too. Like, think about like the people that really hurt you the most, the relationships that left you with the most emotional response. Those are likely what really shaped your beliefs about love, aside from like the parent childhood aspect. And the reason for that too, so some more neuroscience facts for you, is that our subconscious mind, I would say the most powerful way to communicate with your subconscious mind is through emotion. And so whenever you go through an experience that triggers a highly emotional response happens, that is going to really stick with your brain much more than something that you didn't really have a strong emotional response to. So you really want to look at where you were really heartbroken, really hurt, really angry, felt really betrayed, you know, any of those highly emotional experiences in love. And you want to do a deep dive into those and just really see how that affected your beliefs on relationships today. I have a really good exercise on this. I did talk about it, I want to say in the Healing Era episode 3. I talked about the letters method, the emotional release letters method, which you kind of write a letter to everybody that's hurt you and kind of let all that emotion out. That would be something really good to pair with this, because you're realizing, you know, you're going back, right? Because a lot of this is probably suppressed. It's not stuff that you're thinking about on a daily basis. So when you go back, you're likely to really bring some of those emotions that you suppressed up to the surface. And so it's really, really important that when you experience emotion, you don't suppress it. You don't try to push it down and avoid it, because at the end of the day, if we don't feel our emotions, they get stuck in our body, and that is really the root of sickness and disease. If you really want to look into that even more, like just different reflections in your body, it's because of stored emotion that hasn't been felt and released properly. And so that emotional release letters method that I talk about in episode 3 is a great way to release a lot of that stuck energy in the body from previous heartbreaks, and will continue to be something good to do as these emotions come up, as you start reliving some of those past heartbreaks. So that's something with the relationship trauma being stored in your body type of situation. And, you know, I talk about this, I think, yeah, I do. I talk about this in my story in episode 1, but a very common place to store emotional trauma in your body is in the hips. And I actually, after my abusive relationship, I started running a lot, especially during the pandemic, and there was no gyms open, and I started getting some really bad hip pain that led to me needing surgery. And I was told that I was going to need this on my left hip, and I do not need it, because I was able to deal with the energy and release the stored trauma in my body the right way and do the right energy work to heal. And so now I do not experience that issue anymore, which I think is really awesome. So I highly recommend you do the letters method that I talk about in episode 3. And then as you're, you know, going through this past heartbreak stuff, be kind with yourself, right? Like, again, like, you don't want to go to that victim mentality, but you also don't want to beat yourself up either for being like, oh my God, I'm so stupid. I can't believe I did this. And I created this. What the heck? Like, you don't want to be in one side of the spectrum too much, where you're like completely blaming the other person or completely blaming yourself, right? Like, you want just to have that compassion. You didn't know what you didn't know, but now you know. Make peace with the situation, right? Get that acceptance. And I'll do a whole episode on that as well. I think acceptance is an art, and it takes some time to really get the acceptance done the right way to truly move forward. So I will do a more in-depth episode on acceptance as well. But for now, just making peace with the situation, honoring that it led you down this road at the end of the day to go after your dream love life. That's enough for right now to really start getting acceptance and just being compassionate and gentle with yourself, and being kind to yourself for everything that you went through. Because at the end of the day, even though we are conscious creators of our own reality, that doesn't mean that we need to be upset with ourselves because we didn't know. Okay, so until this point you didn't know, or at that point you didn't know. So just be gentle with yourself in that. These are the two buckets, right? The childhood experiences, especially with parents, and then past heartbreaks and relationship trauma that you experienced. Those are what cause these toxic dating patterns to form. And because of these highly emotional experiences, your subconscious stores those as important and teaches you about life. And so once you use those once your subconscious mind uses those to help you better understand how life, how love works, all of that, it creates a link between the two things. That's how these subconscious beliefs form, which is that program, that computer program I was telling you in your mind that runs the show that creates 95% of your reality. Okay. So for example, let's go into an example here because I know that that's like kind of a lot to take in. So say that you were growing up in your childhood, right? And so your parents maybe didn't give you a lot of attention unless you did something really good, like you got an A+ on a test, then they really gave you a lot of attention. But like on the day-to-day, you felt not very seen, heard, or valued by them as a kid. That triggered an emotional response, right? Where you didn't feel special, you didn't feel valued or important because you had an emotional response to that experience. Your subconscious remembered it and linked it to a belief. So it attached meaning to that. And usually a common belief that is formed for people who experience that is, I have to earn love. So if you grew up and your parents only gave you attention when you did something really important, some type of accomplishment or some type of good deed, that would lead you down a subconscious belief that you have to earn love. And so going back to some of the examples of those toxic dating patterns I talk about, where you overgive, maybe you're starting to date a guy and you start to cook for him a lot, or you start to date a guy and you follow up with him, you check in, like almost like a motherly type of thing where you're checking in on him, you're doing his laundry, or you're like just doing a lot of stuff way before you're at that point where you really should be. That is because you have a subconscious belief that you have to earn love. So the more that you do, your brain, and you don't realize this, right? That's why it's subconscious. But your brain is telling you, I need to keep doing more. I need to keep doing more so that he'll love me. The more that I do, the more he'll love me. The more that I do, the more he'll want to date me. And so it's just this cycle that you do. And ultimately, when you overgive like that, you actually push people away. It's an energetic response, right? When the more that you go forward, the more people tend to pull back. It's an energetic pattern that that's just kind of how it goes for the most part. I mean, think about whenever you've been around a guy that you thought was needy, right? You usually weren't interested in him and kind of wanted to kind of take your space. That's what you're doing without even realizing it because of a belief that was formed when you were a child. So that's one example, right? Or again, going back with that divorce example. I just did a childhood example. So let's do a past heartbreak example. Say your first boyfriend, maybe you were a freshman in high school, and your first boyfriend or your first love, in high school, and say he went away to college and he cheated on you in college. Just an example, maybe not a personal experience. That experience caused you to feel highly emotional, right? You were hurt, you were betrayed, you felt unloved, you felt undervalued, disrespected, anything like that, right? Your subconscious mind is going to remember that as an important event in your life because it was so traumatic and upsetting for you. And so our brain needs to attach meaning to things like that when they happen. And so you likely experienced that and felt that you weren't worthy of love. You weren't worthy of healthy love, because when you opened your heart up to love, you got cheated on and you got betrayed. So now that's going to create worthiness wounds where you don't feel worthy of healthy love because it's something that you've never been able to experience. And a lot of times, unfortunately, when that is like one of the first experiences you have with love, it becomes your standard and your new normal, and you come to expect it because your subconscious has formed that belief. And so that's why a lot of people, when they do get cheated on, they get cheated on again and again, or they get betrayed at least in some way. You know, you might not get cheated on every relationship, but there's some sort of betrayal pattern that happens. And so your subconscious belief now is that you're not worthy of amazing love, of healthy love, of receiving loyalty, you know? And so what you'll do is that, going back to an example of a toxic dating pattern, that is usually why the root of choosing an emotionally unavailable partner occurs, because you don't feel like you are worthy of that amazing, extraordinary love. So you choose somebody that's going to validate that belief, that is emotionally unavailable, that will not be able to give you that extraordinary love. And so you might be asking, you know, well, why does our brain want to continue down the road of having these beliefs that are undesirable, or are creating undesirable circumstances that don't serve us? Well, the thing is our brain likes to understand things. It likes certainty. It likes familiarity, because our brains are built to protect us from dying. So the more that we feel that we understand, the more that we feel that we can predict the future, the safer we feel. So your brain would rather feel safe, really, thinking that, oh, everybody, I'm not worthy of healthy love. That's all I know. That's what I'd rather just keep going forward with than have this cognitive dissonance, essentially, which is like another neuroscience-y type of word, where your brain experiences kind of confusion, basically, because you had one belief, but now you've learned new information that contradicts that belief. So if you were to get new information like you're getting today that contradicts your old beliefs, that, oh wait, just because that happened to me doesn't mean I'm unworthy of love. I actually can find an emotionally available partner that will give me the loyalty, the special treatment, and make me feel valued and give me that healthy, extraordinary love that I deserve. Your brain's going to be like, wait a minute. That's not what we learned. That's not what we've come to think of love as. If that's the case, well, I don't really know what to expect from that because I've never experienced that. And that almost triggers like a fight or flight response. Your brain doesn't like that. Your brain would rather like live in the same state of misery than create a new experience that we think is going to be better, or we're told is better, but we don't know because we haven't lived it. That's scarier to the brain. And so that's why it's so important for you guys to know this neuroscience. And that is why my Love Energetics method is rooted in all of this mindset, manifestation, neuroscience, energy type of work, because traditional dating advice does not cover this type of stuff. This is so important for you guys to understand, because you're doing things without even realizing why you're doing them, and you don't have the right tools to change them with traditional dating advice, or just by going off of whatever programming you were given from the ages 0 to 7. You know, that's like a random, like a random lottery. You have it's all just random, not random, but the programming that you were given is likely not the programming that's going to give you what you desire, at least in one or multiple areas of life. So that is why this work is so important, right? So I could go on about this for a really long time, but that's really kind of the way to show you why and how toxic dating patterns form and how that carries into adult life. And so that is why the healing era is so important, right? Because every time you leave a relationship and you experience that same belief, you experience that same outcome, that same pattern of like all the examples I mentioned, right? You're not stopping to see why that's happening. You're not doing the internal work to see why you're attracting that, why you're creating that. And so you keep going into a new relationship and having the same new experience. And that's just strengthening those belief systems, strengthening those emotions, and creating more trauma that's getting stuck in the body more and more. So going from relationship to relationship without healing is just, that's not good, and that's why, like, no new person is going to come in and save you. There is, every time you leave or end a relationship, you will have this experience. You will have this issue come back up. So if you want to end these issues, you have to heal, you have to rewire, you have to clear, and you have to shift before you move into a new relationship. And honestly, a lot of the times, as long as it's not an abusive relationship, you're not in intimate danger, if you do this work, your relationship will improve on its own, which is the crazy thing. If you're experiencing a relationship right now where your partner's not valuing you, not treating you the way that you want to be treated, if you do a lot of this healing work, I can almost guarantee that if you do it the right way, your partner's going to start treating you differently. The more that you raise your self-image, you change your belief system, you raise your frequency and that energy, right? You do all that energy work, you are going to shift internally, which is going to reflect outward, and people are going to start reflecting that new internal state to you. So your partner can actually change the way that they're treating you by doing this internal work. So that is why a new person, a new relationship is not the solution. It is doing this healing work and overcoming these toxic relationship patterns once and for all. And so that is how you got to break the cycle, is through my love and energetics method, is, my tried and true method of how I broke these cycles and how my clients are breaking these cycles. And like I said, once I broke these cycles, I broke them for life. It has been 5 years now. I met my partner 4 years ago, and all this work that I did in that first year has served me to this day, where I don't really need to do much to necessarily maintain it. I'm always evolving and growing, which is helpful. But once I did all of this rewiring and I changed my programming to align with a healthy, extraordinary love life with my soulmate, that was it. I attracted that partner, and now I go through life with him, and things are great. And honestly, if anything does come up, I use the same process to shift whatever reflection is coming up I'm reflecting internally, and the problem gets solved. So this is the solution. This is the key. This is what you need to break these toxic dating cycles and start experiencing the love life that you desire. Start experiencing more fulfilling dating experiences. Start attracting higher quality men. Stop the dead-end dating cycles. This is the solution, okay? Some of the results that you can expect to see from overcoming these toxic dating patterns, from doing this type of work, is that you're not going to be attracting narcissists anymore. You're not going to be experiencing physical or emotional abuse. You're not going to be attracting emotionally available partners. You're not going to find that even attractive or desirable. You're going to be attracting men that want to treat you as the high quality woman that you are. For example, you might be experiencing wishy-washy behavior. You're not going to experience that after you do this work. You're going to experience people being more sure about you, more willing to go the extra mile to impress you, to court you. You're going to be experiencing, honestly, you might have so many options you don't know what to do with, right? A lot of my clients end up shifting into an abundance mentality where there's so many men that want to date them. You're just going to experience a whole new wavelength of different types of men, different type of treatment. You could even experience the same guy himself treating you differently. So, you're going to feel more secure. You're going to feel more at peace. Detachment will be easier. You're not going to put pressure on things. You're going to develop a secure attachment style. You're not going to be in a rush to just date anybody, because now you have this high self-concept. You're worthy of the best, and you know that you're the creator of your reality. So you're not going to settle. You're going to have that high self-worth, and you're going to honor your boundaries, and you're just going to experience the dream love life that you deserve. And it's all going to become so easy, effortless, and natural and aligned for you. So there's really no downside to this transformation, and really the benefits are endless, and these benefits really can ultimately extend into other areas of your life as well. It can improve your finances, your career, your friendships, your family relationships. Like, the benefits are endless. And so I really challenge you to take these takeaways that I mentioned. So I would say, like, let's recap those takeaways, right? So that you can take these takeaways and do some tangible work towards this. And so what that would be is learning what your toxic dating patterns are. Like, get aware on what are the patterns that you have specifically, like, attracting emotionally unavailable people, being cheated on, narcissists, any of that. Like, pick up what your patterns are the most, even the sneaky ones, like the overgiving. Look at every single pattern, okay? Get really aware on that, right? And then go into the childhood attachments, the modeling from the parents that we talked about, and then go into your past heartbreaks and relationship trauma, okay? So what you really want to do is do a deep dive into your past, a deep dive into the experiences that you had, and connect them to beliefs and connect them to those patterns, right? And I know this is hard, right? This is not easy to do. It takes time, it takes willingness, it takes tenacity. You have to be committed to doing this type of work to see those long-term results, and you have to really want it. And so that, if it was easy, everyone would do it. Like, I'm not going to sell you a lie that, it's so easy to do this, but it's so worth it. I can't even describe how worth it is, but once you do the work, it sets you up for life, okay? So it might feel hard now, but it is going to bring you a life of ease, and a life of joy, love, excitement, fulfillment. You can't put a price on that, okay? So this work is so worth it. And, don't go another day without doing this, and don't go another relationship or another year of your life where you're repeating these toxic dating patterns, right? Like, the time is now. I'm calling on you to do this now. And if you saw this now, it's for a reason. You are meant to do this, okay? And if you're watching this live time, like in May of 2025, we just started Pluto retrograde, which is the planet of transformation and death, rebirth, with the ending cycles and starting new cycles type of death, rebirth type of situation. There's no better time than now to dive into this work, okay? Use the astrological energy to really just catapult and slingshot your transformation forward, okay? And you do not need to do this on your own. You absolutely should not do this on your own, okay? Trust me, I've done it before, and while there were times when I did a lot of this work on my own, it took me a lot longer. It was a lot more difficult, and I ran into a lot of roadblocks. And I have found, I've gotten help with coaches and teachers throughout my transformation, and I have found it so much better to have somebody to keep me accountable, to help me navigate things along the way, who's been through what I've been through, and just get those results so much more faster, and just experience so much less frustration and reworking and trial and error, okay? You do not have to do this alone, and you shouldn't have to do this alone. And that is why I am here. I'm here to help you. I am your transformation coach, okay? I have this love energetics method because I want to help other women. I want to help you, okay? So if this really resonated with you and you want to dive deeper, I have resources, okay? I have my one-on-one coaching, whether you want a long-term coaching practice. I have 3 to 6 month coaching packages, but I also have one-on-one activation sessions that can really help you get started if you're not ready to undergo the full transformation just yet. Okay. I have digital resources. I have all the other podcasts here. I have my monthly Love Energetics newsletter that I provide similar snippets of information like this every month into your inbox. Okay. You do not have to go at this alone, and there are so many resources that I have to help you, and I want to keep helping you more and more. So please reach out. I would love to help you further on this. And if you are interested, I have all the links below of other ways that you can work with me, other resources that I have. And if this podcast changed your life in any way, if you got any value out of this, please leave me a 5-star review. Please leave me any type of comment on this podcast. Follow any of my social media accounts. share this with a friend. Anything that you can do to support me would be so helpful, because I truly want to get this message out and help as many women as possible. So again, I hope that you really enjoyed this. I will put the call to actions in the description too, so that you have those as well. Just remember, you don't have to do this alone. You are so worthy and deserving of having the extraordinary love life you deserve. You can and you will manifest your soul-aligned partner. If you're listening to this podcast, you listen to it all the way through. You have the tenacity in you to manifest your dream love life and manifest that lifelong soulmate, okay? That you're not settling, okay? If you made it all the way through this podcast, I know you're not going to be the type of person to settle. You can do this. I believe in you. I see you, I understand you, and I am so excited to see all the amazing things you're going to accomplish now that you understand all of this work. So I hope you enjoyed this episode again, and happy manifesting. This is my little favorite Maria Manifest mantra: live the life you daydream about, okay? You deserve to live your dream life in your everyday life. So live the life you daydream about, and I will talk to you in the next episode. All right, bye.